The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the once starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions, how's it going?
I have faced down my demon.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
outside of the and now that you don't drink anymore, you're finally able to play this game.
I know you're thinking in reverse time. We played this game, and so now I have a drinking problem.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I sometimes I get temporarily screwed up like that, you know, being fifth dimensional and all.
No, I appreciate you coming down to our level.
Well, for me it's left.
And slower. We have been talking on and off, I think, about this game, and every time I mention this, you probably go, oh yeah, and then forget about it. But for me, it's like days of being haunted. Like, is this going to be the episode where we finally play Sonic 3D Blast? And this is now finally the episode where we played Sonic 3D Blast.
Well, and to kind of drive home how much I nothinged this game was that every time you said we should play Sonic 3D Blast, and I went like, maybe. I was buying time to a degree because my brain was saying we've already played Sonic Spinball. Because when you'd say Sonic 3D Blast, that would be the game that would come into my head, and I'd be like, no, we played that one. I'd be like, oh no, wait, that was Sonic Spinball. We haven't played 3D Blast. That's right. But by then the conversation had ended, and we just moved on to the next thing.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those Sonic games that this was not made by the main Sonic team, right? So this falls into, I'm not sure I played that one territory, even for Sonic fans, right? Like, everybody played 1, 2, and 3 if you like Sonic, right? If you do enjoy 3D Sonic for some reason, you may have played, a bunch of the later ones like Sonic Adventure or Generations or whatever, but this is considered a mainline game, and yet it is totally different, right? It's made by a different company and everything. I mean, it's licensed. It's not like it's not a knockoff, but kind of feels like it.
Yeah, it's weirdly singular. It'd make a great horror film because it's almost uncanny, where it's like you're like, oh, did you play a Sonic game? You'd think so, but but we'll get into that.
So real quick, November 1996, this game originally came out. This was the last Sonic game for the Sega Genesis, and I actually didn't know this until I was looking up artwork for this game. This was also ported to the Saturn. So the graphics on the Saturn are different. They're better. Like they are better, no question, but like they're better in a way that almost changes the art direction. Like it's a little disingenuous to directly compare them because like the Zelda franchise very regularly in the modern era is like, oh, we released it on this console, but we took so long that there's a new console, and so it's on the GameCube and the Wii, or it's on the Wii U and the Switch, and usually it's like, oh yeah, it looks better, but it's basically the same game, right? Not true for Sonic 3D Blast. Like on the Sega Saturn, it is virtually unrecognizable, not because they did different things with the camera or the gameplay or anything, but just holy moly. Anyway, 96 is really late for Genesis games, right? So they were pushing it. Here is my summary of this game. Sonic 3D Blast is a platformer in which the player must save the magical flickies captured by the evil Robotnik. This was the first 3D Sonic game, the last Sonic game on the Genesis, and a flicky in the coal mine for the future of the Sonic franchise.
Damn. Did you pull that summary from somewhere?
No, I made that up.
You made that up?
Yeah.
Awesome. Nicely done. Nicely done. You're not wrong. It's yeah.
So let me tell you my nostalgia experience for this. I think I may have actually shared this story, so I'll do the condensed version. But the reason I've been wanting to replay this game for nostalgia goggles is because this game was my birthday present when I was a kid. I wanted this
Aw.
game. It had
Who
just
didn't like you?
yeah, well, so this is the thing, right? Is the problem is my mother loves me very much, and this game had come out the previous November. So my birthday's in springtime. So for my birthday the following year, I was, like we were a family of modest means. And so she took me to Walmart to pick out a video game that was going to be my one birthday present. So I said, I want this Sonic game because it's a Sonic game I don't have. And I love Sonic games. So we bought it. I went home and this is how I remember it happening. I sat down, I put the game in, I played it. I died 0 times. I got all the Chaos Emeralds on the first try, and I finished the game in like 3 hours. And I literally remember going to my mother crying because I was like, I wasted my birthday present on this. And like, it's a video game. You can't return it to the store. It has been opened. Right.
Right.
So that was like, there's probably some weird memory chicanery and hyperbole in there that I've now just accepted as fact. But like, that is my memory for this game, is that it has haunted me my entire adult life. So that's why I was like, could it possibly be as bad in reality as it was in my memory? I must go find out. Now we have.
Yes. So I fortunately escaped this game because as this was starting to, like crumble, the Sonic franchise, starting to fall to pieces, I had jumped shipped to Nintendo at that point, right? So I fortunately, remember the Titanic just sailing beautifully, and it had all of the amenities and all these fantastic things. And then right as I was like getting onto like the boat, because I wasn't taking it all the way, I was like, I like had another private ship come pick me up. Like I hear the person singing beautifully in the background, and now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain, and I'm just kind of like, huh, odd song, weird iceberg, let's go, and then just like left. So I never played this one, and so I'm coming at it fresh.
Yeah, going out. For anyone in like our age bracket who may have stopped playing video games when they were, an older teenager or going into college, if the last Sonic game you played was Sonic 3 and Knuckles, like what a way to end the franchise compared to people who played like Sonic 06 and the stupid Were Sonic one where he like turns into a werehog. Like, can you imagine those two people trying to have a conversation about this franchise if somehow they didn't know about the other's games? Like, I mean, one person thinks only the 2D games existed.
Well, because that's the thing is that, I basically checked out of the Sonic franchise for a decade, right? And then somebody somewhere said something about like Sonic. So I Googled it, and it was like making your favorite dish and then putting it into the refrigerator for 10 years and then opening the refrigerator for the first time. And you're like, what happened? Like, I mean, I didn't expect it to keep perfectly, but at the same point in time, there wasn't space aliens in there, and there's space aliens in here now. I mean, just so many choices were made. Chill?
Yes, we shall.
We shall.
If you feel like you need another 70 minutes to figure out where we're going with this, and you want to continue to support the show, listening obviously helps the most. But a close second to that is you can follow us online. We're both on the Twitters. I stream these games on Twitch. This game also falls into the category of loud, angry swearfest that will eventually be forgotten to the annals of time. So, if you want to see that stuff when it happens live, you got to do that. If you want to go above and beyond for supporting us, ratings and reviews, reach out and tell a friend. Word of mouth recommendations, I think, are always the most helpful. And if you want to go extra super crazy, you can support us on Patreon. Everybody who supports us on Patreon gets the after show. But if you support at higher tiers, you can get cool things like stickers and also your name shouted out on the show. So first, we need to thank our 8-bit classics, Yarno,
Cram the Rabbit,
Jason,
Army Rose,
John,
Mortal Sonic,
and Kevin,
Shorto the Hodgehog,
and our 16-bit heroes, Jacob,
Buckles the Echidna,
and Michael,
Kilometers per hour,
and our full 3D supporter, David.
Sonic the Hedgehog.
You know, what's sad is, like, I know those were all wrong, but I'm not positive. Well, there's so
the fun
many.
thing is I threw in one that's correct. Which one was it?
I actually don't know.
They're all wrong, but you could have probably spent some time going back and re-listening, be like, maybe Mortal Sonic? I don't.
Yeah, man. He went through the weird franchise thing of more characters, which is not, to be fair, that was not a Sonic failing. That was a 90s thing. In the 90s, they piled on to just wanted franchising opportunities. I don't know what it was. Just more characters, more and more characters in there. Everything had to be Looney Tunes.
Like Roy in The Simpsons.
Yes, right. I mean, it is an old. I guess it actually goes way back to even like the Flintstones and stuff, right? They're like, oh, we're gonna add in Bam Bam, we're gonna add in Scrappy Doo, like, but it's that like times 1,000.
Yeah.
Oh God. Anyway, let's talk about the audio visuals for this thing. Saying this is the first 3D Sonic game is an incredibly generous statement, because it's isometric view and the models were 3D rendered in a computer and then traced over with pixel art, so that, because the Genesis cannot render polygons, right? It just straight up can't. So everything you're seeing has the like sense of depth as if it were happening in 3 dimensions, but it's literally not. Famously, you were actually the one who told me this. Super Mario Brothers 3 on the Nintendo was going to be isometric, and then Miyamoto went, no, because that will make platforming impossible. And we'll get to the gameplay later. But this looks exactly like Super Mario Brothers 3 on the Nintendo looks in an alternate dimension. It's a weird, think of any strategy game you've ever played, right? It's Sonic on a chessboard, and then you're trying to platform around in a world that you're forced to look down from on high at a 45-degree angle at. Like, it would be like, to imagine Final Fantasy Tactics, but reskinned as Sonic. Yeah. Yes. It is that exact camera.
Yeah. So for me, just visuals for the sake of visuals. Honestly, if I were to strip away all additional knowledge that I have of this and just look at it, I'd say, like, hey, for the Genesis, it doesn't look that bad, like, I mean, as far as just the art design in general, right?
I will give that to you on the levels and the baddies and the bosses. I think the heroes, so Sonic, and you also see Knuckles and Tails, even though you can't play as them, I think the heroes look like garbage. Personally, but I do agree with you that, like, if you're just looking at a still of the levels or of the boss fights or anything, like, those actually are like, oh, hey, I know it's not 3D, but it's a good attempt, and for the Genesis, it's a great attempt.
And that's kind of where I'm at with it, where I'm just kind of like, okay, in isolation, I would say, like, oh, hey, again, like, if I just saw this still, I'm not playing the game or anything like that, I just looked at it and be like, oh, hey, that actually looks pretty good. This must be like their first attempt at 3D before everything went to hell. And then if I played it, I might rethink that. That being said, I will say that the visuals make the game as a whole feel very claustrophobic, right? Because there's walls everywhere, because it looks like Final Fantasy Tactics, right?
You're basically staring at the ground all the time.
Right, you're staring at the ground all the time. And so, the level becomes then weirdly finite, because what they didn't do was they didn't make it and I guess this traces in the level design, but instead of making it one long linear place with like several branching pathways that you can take, it's exploring in this 3D world. So they can't, flesh everything out. So that it's very little depth and then a whole lot of breadth, right? So I say that to say that, it just feels like that you're running into walls all the time, because there's no place where you can really get going. And I think that is in part because in normal Sonic, you have the screen, but because you're moving linearly, you assume that the universe continues infinitely, right? Your brain just just writes that into your head, right? That's emphatically not the case. There are walls left, right, and in between to keep you from just careening into the void, right? But because they did that, I'm like, oh my god, this level's like 5 meters across.
Well, and I think that's an interesting visual issue with this game specifically, but this kind of game even more broadly, because we will talk about like how the camera and the isometric impacts the gameplay. But what I think is interesting about how badly it impacts the gameplay is I believe that just from the visuals, you would actually notice that problem without being the one playing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you were sitting next to me on the couch and I had the controller, it is not hard to imagine you being like, God, everything is so like, how do you know where to go? How do you know what you're doing, right? Because even if I look like I'm moving seamlessly through the world, which is unlikely you would ever see a player doing that, but you would still feel that sense of like kind of disorientation just from the visuals alone. And then a weird coincidence, I guess, is when I was bringing up screenshots of this ahead of recording, I happened to find a website where someone did like full, like where you can see the entire map. So it's like a super zoomed out, and they do this for lots of old video games because they just go in and pull the art assets out. And these levels zoomed all the way out look awesome. They look so awesome. They look like we played Kirby's Dream Course. There's also an old game for the Nintendo that I think was literally called Marbles that used the kind of isometric camera. And they look like Marbles levels. They're like pinball levels. Like this is, if you took these levels wholesale and just put in the mechanics of pinball, like it might actually be kind of fun. But I think because I had that same claustrophobic feeling that you're describing, and I was kind of like, oh, well, maybe is it kind of the camera, or is it just like, because maybe Sonic's, the sprite is a little bit too big. And then I had the realization you're describing when I saw these visuals. I was just like, oh no, it's because you can never see beyond the ground. Like you're just always staring at a solid impenetrable surface. It's either a wall, in the 45 in the northwest and northeast of the camera, or it's the ground. Like you just walls everywhere.
Well, and so it's and this type of visual style is not inherently bad. So to compare it again to Final Fantasy Tactics, right? It works in Final Fantasy Tactics because the point of Final Fantasy Tactics is you are supposed to be fighting somebody, fighting whomever, right? So you were supposed to be gaining a very keen, intimate knowledge of a very small area as you are walking around and trying to turn by turn tactically use it to, rout your enemy, right? That's not at all what Sonic is about, right? Sonic is about, in the broad sense, momentum control, but also, gotta go fast, right? So it would be, like, playing bumper cars with a Formula One racer, I mean, like, there's a reason why those are two very different enjoyment things, right? Like the Formula One racer, it's like, how fast can I get this thing going? Oh man, I got it going super fast. That's great. And like, look, I'm zooming around, and then platform, zoom around some more, right? And then they said like, okay, but now it's going to be like bumper cars. You're like, okay, well then this isn't Sonic anymore, and you need to abandon all of it and just make it a different game. So yeah, it's the changing the camera angle here. I mean, and as you see in later Sonic games, so not burying the lead on this one, but as you see in later Sonic games, right, is that the core mechanic of momentum control in Sonic is really, really difficult to execute on in 3D to give you that same kind of roller coaster-esque feel. And so even when you have a full 3D, it kind of loses something. Having an isometric view hamstrings it.
Yeah, I mean, in many isometric games, one, you're not moving quickly, and two, you do still have some camera controls, which again, the Genesis obviously was completely incapable of doing. The Saturn also didn't have camera controls, right? You're stuck in this 45, true isometric kind of view. Now, I will say, and I do mean this completely sincerely, music in this game is phenomenal. I know because I'm so familiar with the splash screens that even without having to look anything up, the fact that there's Traveler's Tales in the opening of this game, it's like, oh, this game was not made by Sonic Team. Like they outsourced this to another company. And I've played other Traveler's Tales games. Like, they are not a bad studio, right? So, whatever a person thinks about this game, it's not like the studio was like, just give it to the lame studio overseas or whatever. It really feels like either they kept the music in-house, or someone at that studio that did the music was like a rock star at imitating another composer's style, because this music is good. Like, it is as good as the other Genesis Sonic games, and that is a hell of a compliment. Like, those games have fantastic music.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. My note for music is the music reminds me of another game I wish I was playing.
Yeah.
So, and we kind of mentioned this. So to me personally, that's a double-edged sword, right? So like, yeah, the music's great, and it very much so is reminiscent of Sonic. The music is, all the sound effects are pulled directly from Sonic, if not, then near perfectly replicated. But remember when we played Legend of Zelda 2, and I was really glad they didn't have the Hyrule theme in there, because then I didn't have to sit there and be like, man, I wish I was playing Legend of Zelda, right? Well, this is the opposite of that. So it's just kind of like, as I was playing this game, I came a couple of times close to just shutting it down, popping in Sonic, to wash the taste out of my mouth. I'm like, no, that might give me a weird view of it. The one last thing I did want to say about the visuals specifically is that all of the levels, to me at least, felt very samey. They felt kind of, they're not, but they felt a lot like palette swaps. And then when I kind of tried to peel that onion, I was like, but they're not, though. Look at all the different art assets they have in each one when I'm looking at it, but they feel samey. And I realized, and to use what you said, is because you're staring at the ground most of the time, and the ground is a palette swap.
Yeah. Yeah, because the ground is a checkerboard grid of solid colors in every stage,
right? It's exactly the same. So I'm like, that's why it feels like a palette swap, because most of what you're looking at inherently is a palette swap, and that's kind of a bummer, because they did a lot of work on bringing in all these different art assets and these different, trying their best to do the different game feel. But it's kind of like, yeah, you put the fringe on the outside of the cake looks different, but it's a vanilla cake every single time. Yeah. So did you change much? I mean, there's only so much you can do.
The last thing I will say about the visuals is I feel like the heroes, right? Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, they lost a lot of their character. The way they move and look just doesn't feel quite right. And it's frustrating coming off the back of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which had exceptionally well realized, incredibly iconic versions of these characters that basically almost every game has failed to emulate ever since. Like, they had to redesign Sonic in his entirety in the 3D games, and I think part of it is because they just couldn't quite nail the rude dude attitude of 2D pixel art Sonic into 3D. And Grant, that's hard, right? You can cheat things in 2 dimensions that you cannot cheat in 3 dimensions. Famously for Sonic and, Mickey Mouse and a lot of characters is like the side mouth, like that makes sense in 2D. That does not make sense in 3 dimensions. So like it is a different medium. What happened with the special stages? Did you go to any of the special stages?
I went to a couple of the special stages.
Okay. So mechanically, and I know we're not talking about that yet, but mechanically they function almost exactly like the special stages from Sonic 2, which are my favorite version of the special stages. The half pipe where you're running away from the camera. I love that version. Yeah. The music, man, it's so good. Like those special stages are so good. Mechanically, these function basically like that. You have to collect rings. There's gates. If you don't have enough rings by the time you get to the gate, you can't go through it and it kicks you out of the stage. There's bombs. The bombs make you drop rings, but you can progress, so you can get back on your feet. Like, it's basically the exact same concept, and they look like garbage. I mean, utter trash. It is so, the first time a special stage loaded, I think I sat back in my seat and I was just like, I have no memories of this. Like I pushed this completely out of my mind. This what is this? It, like the graphics themselves are literally worse. Like everything's a lot grainier. it's doing like a mode 7 style of scrolling, so the graininess is like flying all over the place. You have this little tiny chute that you can operate in. It's not the cool, full loop you can do like in Sonic 2. It looks like crap. It's so bad. It honestly,
yeah, it's bad.
It honestly looks like, because the rest of the graphics in the game are not this uniquely bad. This looks like something they were trying to do something else and it didn't work, and they had to ship the game because they were rushed. I know that this game was rushed just from like other, Sonic lore I've learned over my life. And this, there is no way this is what they wanted. There's no way they wanted this to look like this, because the regular levels don't look like this.
Right. No, I mean, they probably just, were like, hey, this is what's going to do mechanically. And then they were like, do we got to ship it? And they said, I mean, wireframe, just go for it. On two things on the thing you were saying before that, which is one, the being able to cheat stuff in 2D. The thing I always think of for that is Goku's hair, because
in the comic, you mean?
Well, yeah, or in the anime versus like when you try to create a 3D figure of him,
Yes. Yeah, it does not make sense in 3D.
Right, because it's like when he's staring directly at you, he's got like the three, tips off to the side. And then when he's looking dead forward, they're straight forward. And that makes sense in 2D. And then occasionally, like, they'll pan around him and then they'll be like, switch to the side, and you can just cheat that, right? But then, when you're like, I remember the first time I saw a 3D figure of him, I'm like, I mean, I guess that's what it'd have to look like, right? That, and then, I agree on the character models. I think that the original Sonic had attitude. He was completely proactive. I mean, a total paradigm shift, and this the Sonic had none of that.
You turn him into like an 80s stockbroker.
Actually, that is a Simpsons quote.
Oh, it is, yes, yeah, from the Itchy and Scratchy episode,
yeah. When they're making Poochie.
Yeah.
Paradigm shift, proactive. Aren't these just words that stupid people use to sound smart? I'm fired, aren't I? Absolutely.
These people should have been fired. No, they were doing their best.
Yep.
All right, should we talk about the gameplay?
Do it.
It's bad. So it's bad for all of the reasons that are obvious if you just even looked at a screenshot of this and how a Sonic game plays, because I commend you for trying not to lean too hard into the mechanics of it, but in 2D Sonic games, momentum is the name of the game. And they got that wrong in ways that I think are actually fascinating. Like that you wouldn't expect if you just said, oh, we took a 2D Sonic game and we moved the camera up here. And it's like, yeah, but what about all the knock-on effects? And like, here's a subtle one. So imagine you're playing Sonic 3, right? You do the spin dash and you go through a loop and then you smash into a wall. What happens?
All of the little blocks like fall away and then you zip through and you either gain momentum or lose depending on how the roller coaster's going. Okay.
And then on the other side of that, you hit like an immovable wall. So like now you crash into something that you can't break. What happens?
You dead ass stop.
Dead ass stop. What happens in this game when you roll into a wall? You bounce off of it. You bounce off of it, right? Which changes everything, because now you are massively incentivized to just be in the ball all the time, which you would say, oh, that's kind of like in 2D Sonic where you're, at risk of crashing into an enemy if you're up and running, but you can hurt certain, most early enemies if you're rolling. And it's like, yeah, that's true. But there's a trade-off between you can't gain momentum while you're rolling because you're rolling. You can only gain momentum if you're running because your feet are on the ground. In this, because you never get a good head of steam going anyway, because you're always staring at the ground and you have no idea what's off to your left, right, north, and south, like you just ball up and it works really well, even up into the later stages where there's like lava and spikes and crap, because you just bounce around like a moron, but it's not any fun. You don't feel like, oh, the way I'm supposed to navigate the world is by bouncing around in my Sonic Hedgehog ball, because that's not what Sonic does. Like maybe there is a kind of game where you're
Sonic Spinball.
Yeah, Pinball Man, right? And it's like you just stay in the ball all the time. But this ain't that. Like I want to be up on my feet, like navigating, right? When you're in the ball, you're kind of at the whims of the level.
Well, and so I think that you kind of hit on one of the things I wanted to discuss, which is that this game, talking about the tension and release cycle, right? So basically, most media, right, has this, right? I'm most familiar of it with in horror games, right? So the idea, or horror movies, right? So the idea is that like there's like they build tension, and then a thing happens, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, and then they'll back off of you for a little bit, and then they slowly build tension, and so you've got to have that release, right? Sonic games do that too, right? So the idea is that well, roller coasters do that, right? You build. Oh my gosh, whoa! Build. So Sonic games do that, right? Because when you're typically doing the super fast movement, you're normally in your ball because the game is taking the momentum for you, right? You're sliding down the roller coaster, right? So you're kind of invincible, not perfectly, but pretty much, right? It's like, whee! And then you do some platforming and you work on gaining some momentum and some momentum and some momentum, and then whee, right? This game doesn't do any of that, right? It's all tension all of the time, right? And that's completely antithetical to what Sonic games are. If you're going to go with pure controlling momentum is the name of the game, right? Now, Mario games don't do that because the name of the game is just it's game as obstacle course, right? So the point of Mario isn't to gotta go fast. It's to deftly control your limited control over the next highest axis. So in this case, the y-axis for 2D games, or the z-axis in 3D games, right? How well can you control that your control of that third axis, right? This game tries to kind of split the difference, and it fails. Because you kind of need to do one or the other. You can't do both.
Well, and it's the loop, I think, is such a great isolated example, because you might not be able to tell this if you were just watching someone play the game. But even if you have never played a Sonic game, if you can picture one, there's a good chance you're picturing the loop, right? Because that's what a brilliant way, going all the way back to, Green Hill Zone and Sonic 1, what a great way to communicate to the player how fast Sonic is supposed to be moving, right? He can run on his feet around this, weirdly, naturally occurring perfect skateboard ramp and not fall down. Like, what a fantastic visual to juxtapose him against Mario, right? Or any other 2D platformer. Just like Sonic is so fast, he can run upside down. Like it's cool. It's a super cool visual. This game only has, I think there's maybe half a dozen in the entire game of the loop. And every time you go through one, they are essentially cutscenes, right? Like you jump into a hole and it pushes you to another part of the level. And on your way to that part of the level, it pushes you through the loop. And regular good Sonic games have some loops that you're just forced through automatically. And it's basically going to happen to you whether you want it or not, but not always, right? And so thinking back to like how it feels to play a 2D Sonic game is when you're going through the loop, even though the computer's pushing you through it, you're holding right on the controller, aren't you? Because what if the computer's not pushing you through it, right? There's like that sense of tension of like, I don't want to lose my momentum. I don't want to, not make it around the loop. I don't want to fall from the top and look like a moron. Like there's just that, even though like, Jesus has the wheel, like you keep your hands on the wheel just in case, right? And the loops in this game are not fun. Like I literally, one of my bullets in my notes is, how did you make loops unfun? Like the most Sonic-y, like if you were going to take a single part of a Sonic level and isolate it in a way that someone would look at it and say, oh, that's from a Sonic game. You could do it as a silhouette. You could do it in black and white. You could do it without the characters present, but it's the loop. It's definitely the loop.
No, I mean, to the point where just to back your thing is I was playing Minecraft with Teddy, and Minecraft was like, hey man, we got these new packages. You want to try like reskin to Steven Universe, which is awesome, by the way. You should check that out. But they apparently published one for Sonic, right? And in the background, they had the loop, And I remember seeing that and being like, how are you going to do that in Minecraft, man? Like, to the point where I was almost like, oh, it might be worth $5. I didn't buy it. But to your point, right, is that if you're going to advertise Sonic, you have a blue Sonic the Hedgehog, right? And then probably the loop-de-loop, right? It is the loop is about as famous as Tails, you know?
Yes. They are equally supporting characters in the Sonic universe.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say too that the jump physics just don't, well, the jump hitboxes and things like that, they don't work to save your life, man. And it's to the point where bad. it's so core to what they were trying to do, and it's just so not fun, like, so literally, I mean, discounting the enemies, right? Even just a stationary box that has a bonus in it, which ostensibly I should just be excited to get. I mean, remember how in normal Sonic games, normal Morty, yeah, put it in your blog. In normal Sonic games, they when you get like one of those little boxes, you're like, oh man, this has a fire shield in it. Oh my god, that's so cool. Or, oh, this one has like 10 extra coins. That's great because now I can go get the secret zone or whatever, right? That was so exciting, right? And when it would break, it was super satisfying because it do this little poof, and you're like, yeah, I got the thing, right? This, I'd see a thing, I'm like, oh my god, because I can't leave it alone. I mean, just me, I can't walk away from it, even if I don't need it. But I'd be like, I'm just going to be spending the next 30 seconds jumping over this thing until I jump on it. So it's like, it was like being given a chore. And so I thought about this and I was like, okay, first thing I checked for was the shadow. And they do that. They do a shadow where you're jumping, right? So I was like, okay, why does this still suck then? And then I realized it's because it's in my opinion, it's too high precision, because I thought about it. Even Mario 64, the first 3D Mario game, knew to back off of the precision platforming at this time, right? So if you think about like the stuff that you platform in Mario 64, it's all 3 times the size of Mario, Like the main thing is like the timing of it in general, not whether or not you got the perfect XYZ coordinate correct. It's whether or not you were just in the ballpark with the timing, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, in the original Marios, they had Goombas for days. There's just Goombas everywhere. There's like 3 of them, like they're very, very rare because they knew like trying to stomp on this specific thing is going to be a pain. And Sonic said, nah, we got this. And they didn't.
Well, and I can do you 2 better. So in Super Mario 64, do you know what was specifically added in that game? The ground pound.
Mm-hmm. Because so you just immediately stop.
Then as soon as you see the shadow where you want to land, you can ground pound. And granted, most people don't play that way, and the levels are not designed to require that generally. But if you really, really sucked at the platforming and you were like, okay, I just need to vaguely jump in its direction, and then when I see the shadow over the platform, I'm going to hit, it's probably the Z button, right, and ground pound. You can't do that in Sonic 3D Blast. You just have to finesse it. And the other thing, and I think this is, I hadn't thought about it in quite this way before, so I'm thinking this as I'm saying it, but I think the real problem with why this was always destined to fail, and probably no one could have done this well, and it's not the developer's fault, and it's not the fault that it's not how Sonic is supposed to be, even though it's super not. Think in your mind what the D-pad looks like, and then think in this game how often you ever move in those directions. It's never, right? You're always going, you're never going true north or, true east. You're always going northeast or northwest, which means you have to now push the phantom button between, and the Genesis, the 6 button pad at least, has like a circle around it so you can kind of feel where those corners are, but it's not good. It's not meant for that. It's meant for rolling through in fighting games. It's not meant for using as a cardinal direction, and this game requires you to exclusively use them as cardinal directions. You can move true north, true south, true east, and true west, but you never do because there's never anything over there. The platforms are always on the 45s, right? So if you're going like platform to platform to platform, you must necessarily be pressing in these weird, like 45-degree angle, non-cardinal directions on the D-pad, which again, D-pad is not meant for that. So like they have literally asked you to do something and then said, oh, but we're not Like, we're not going to change the controller. Like, what are we, Nintendo? We're going to build a whole new controller around this concept? No, no, no. Do it with the controller you already have.
Yeah, and that's actually my one of my notes, which is if you're going to try to do a 3D game, you have to have an analog stick. I mean, even one. I mean, like two would be sweet. But I mean, you have to, because you need to be able to maneuver in, because here's the thing, right? Is that in a two-dimensional game, right? And we've kind of discussed this before. The challenge of a two-dimensional platformer is you are given infinite control over one axis, right? And partial control over a second axis. And it's how well can you utilize your control over that second axis, right? To accomplish your goal. So then in a three-dimensional platformer, you have infinite control over two axes, and it's how well can you control the third axis, right? So therefore, in a 2D platformer, right, you only need to basically have the forward and back button, right? You need, because that's the thing you have infinite control of, right? If you're going to have infinite control over a plane, you need to have infinite control over that plane, right? You need to be able to maneuver anywhere in that plane you want to be, and then jump whenever you want to. And so in order to do that, you just have to have an analog stick. I don't know any way around that. Like, it is an absolute must have.
So I got to interrupt you real quick. You just made me realize, I was like, oh, maybe this wasn't a problem on the Sega Saturn. So, because I never had a Saturn, although I had some friends that did. So I looked up a picture of the controller for the Sega Saturn, and the original controller that the Sega Saturn shipped with also did not have an analog stick, which means this game was designed and expected to be played with the D-pad, even though, why on earth would you do that to people? The real cherry on that sundae, though, is like the PlayStation, because the original PlayStation controller also didn't have analog sticks, and then they added them in the exact place modern PlayStation controllers have them, and they've been using that design ever since. The Sega Saturn controller that has an analog stick, let's just take a second. Go ahead and Google Sega Saturn 3D controller, and you tell me what you see.
Why? But why though?
It's massive. It's absolutely massive. It's the size of a CD
circle.
Yes, it is a perfect circle with little knobbly handles sticking off the bottom.
It's supposed to be a Saturn.
Saturn, yes, yeah. But
you did it. You made the dad joke at the cost of the company.
Yeah, it's a Sega controller, right? It's the Genesis controller with the 6 buttons, and then a thumbstick, right? Granted, where they place the thumbstick, I think, is actually better than where the Nintendo 64 controller placed it. But this controller looks like a joke. Like, it looks like they haven't finished rendering the CAD file.
Yeah. No, like it's interesting because when you said the original one didn't have an analog stick, I was like, it did. I was thinking of the Dreamcast.
Yeah.
Because that's what I was picturing when I was picturing the Sega Saturn.
Yeah, Sega, when they were falling off their ability to compete with Nintendo, they threw hardware into the market like they had already made it 10 years ago, and they owed the mob money. Like, they came out there because there's the Sega Genesis, right? Sega Genesis had some great games. And then there's the Sega CD, which was an add-on for the Sega Genesis. There was the Sega 32X, which was also an add-on for the Sega Genesis. And then there was the Sega Saturn. And then like 20 minutes later, there was the Sega Dreamcast, which also only lasted for about 20 minutes. Like, and all that was in a span of like 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, so I think that this is slightly tangential, but
it's
in my opinion, Sega is kind of like an exemplar of somebody who, of like a company that doesn't really take the time to really understand the depth of like what it is they do and their market, and Nintendo did. So Nintendo was like, all right, you know what, we know what we do, we know who we are, we're going to continue to do this, and we're just going to slowly, like let's be careful, let's do this correct, and we're just gonna muscle through, and Sega said, "No, man, we've got attitude, we got this. Look at this, we got Sonic, we got this whole game system. Yeah, let's do that." And it's like, yeah, and then they just exploded, and everybody was like, "Oh man, should we wait? Is Nintendo doing this right? Like maybe we should." Maybe we should be doing what Sega's doing. And then they say like, all right, guys, sales are starting to drop. What do we do? And it's like, 3D. Everybody likes 3D. Let's do 3D. And it's like, okay, sure. And then it just failed. Like, well, I mean, the reason why is the system. Let's get a new system out there. It's like, okay. And then that system was not well thought out. And so it's just kind of like it was just throwing solutions without ever understanding the problem, and then this is what you get.
Yeah. So I happen to know a little bit about this because I read a book years ago about like the console wars.
Better have been years ago. Otherwise, it would have been research.
It was well, and it's about the companies in the macro, kind of exactly what you're talking about. So depending on how we're feeling, I might share some of this with you in the after show because I think it's actually super fascinating and deeply sad for the people who worked at the company and really believed in video games as a market and in the characters and the IP and stuff that they owned. It's a little outside the scope of just this one particular catastrophic failure on the company's part. So we got to focus on why Sonic 3D Blast is terrible. There are a few things that they changed up in the gameplay kind of traditional Sonic design that I think are actually not terrible. Like, I don't like the way they changed how Sonic moves. I don't like the way they changed how he looks. There's a lot of things. Everything with the isometric camera I think is terrible. One decision they made that I actually am like 100% on board with, the bosses are their own stage.
Yes,
I like that.
Sweet. Yeah,
I really like games where it's like there's the action part and then here's the action part and then the boss, right? Because every Mega Man game we've played, we've talked about this where it's like, you get to the boss and then you die. And in some Mega Man games, I think in all Mega Man games, if you die in the boss, you get kicked back to the boss hallway. But if you're right outside the boss hallway, you get kicked all the way back to the middle of the stage, right? And they change that in later games, but like, just don't do, because now if I die 4 times, now I have to replay the whole level. Will anything in that level teach me how to beat the boss? And the answer is almost universally no, right? Mario is big on that. Mega Man, most other games, not quite as much, right? And Sonic, not really at all. Like the bosses are thematically related to the stage you're in, but there's nothing in the stage that teaches you how to fight the boss. So just put them in their own little thematic sandbox where they use the same palettes and the machine that Dr. Robotnik is in looks like it came from the levels that you're currently going through, but don't make me replay the whole act just to get to him. So like having that on its own stage, big thumbs up. Another thing, there's no timers. And I have a lot more to say about that, but I'm going to take a second. How did you feel about there being no timers?
I mean, I appreciate it just because to me, I don't know. For me personally, like I don't enjoy, I just don't enjoy that particular aspect because I'm not trying to maximize for that portion of it, So I'm not trying to say like, can I get the best time? If I want to, then I've got a stopwatch for that, And so then outside of that, saying like, oh well, there's a lot of different constraints. Also, there's a time constraint. Unless you're literally going to make it so that way, you're trying to create the emotion of like panic, then that's fine, which they kind of do in Sonic games with the drowning, right? Like
yes, that does induce panic.
It does, right? I mean, you hear that today, and you get the dry sweats, right? But that makes sense because what they're trying to do is be like, get out of the water fast, and then hopefully kind of like make you make a mistake, right? But if that's not the theme of the whole thing, then no, I don't care for timers. I did like the fact that there is a timer, but it just says too long if you take too long.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So you're not punished, but it tries to incentivize you to not have them make fun of you. So here's a thing that I think is an interesting change to the Sonic formula, right? Because the stupid camera, the fact that he looks like an idiot, the fact that he bounces off walls and stuff, like those are arguably incremental changes that just, I think for my dollar, incremented in a bad direction, right? But they're not dramatic rethinkings of the formula. The way you get through these levels is all the levels. So there's a zone and it's broken into 2 acts and then a boss. And each act has I think like 3-ish sections. And to get from section 1 to section 2, you have to rescue all 5 flickies that are in that first section. And then in the second section, there are 5 more flickies. And then if there's another section, there's 5 more flickies. And you just have to keep doing that until you get to the end of the stage. Because ostensibly, the story of the game is you are specifically on this island to rescue these flickies, right? Like, they are magical, and Dr. Robotnik is going to use them to do Chaos Emerald stuff. And so, like, you stop him by getting the flickies back, right? Which is a huge difference. Like, that doesn't, you're like, well, every goddamn Sonic game is about saving stupid animals that are trapped inside robots. The difference in this game is it makes combat required. You must defeat every single enemy. And I mean that. There is exactly 1 robot for every flicky you have to rescue, which means no longer can you say, oh, I deftly jumped over that, or I went speeding underneath that stupid, bumblebee enemy or whatever. You have to stop what you're doing and engage with every enemy, which throws all the other things we've talked about into even sharper relief. Are you trying to platform and jump on top of those enemies? Well, that sucks and it's not any fun. Are you trying to run into them? Well, you can't. You have to roll into them. So make sure you're rolling if you're going to attack them that way. And you can't really see them if they're off screen because they're standing at the goddamn ground all the time. So thank God they don't move very fast. But like, forcing combat is a huge change. And to their credit, because the levels are non-linear and you essentially now are forced into exploration mode, they took the timer away.
Right.
So I do appreciate that someone recognized, listen, if there's going to be a big sprawling non-linear stage and they have to go into every nook and cranny until they find every robot and kill it and collect that flicky, which by the way, you can drop and is insufferable. But taking the timer away was a kindness. Like, it's a real, because you could imagine them being like, oh yeah, Sonic, I can tell you Sonic levels are 10 minutes. Sonic levels are 10 minutes. I know that that's how long a Sonic level is. Right. And when you're playing, if you go over 10 minutes, that is when it says too long, right? It's exactly at 10 minutes that they tell you suck, because that's how long Sonic levels are. So taking that away is not like, oh, well, it's a different kind of game. No, that was a mercy. Someone wanted to include that, and then someone else went, no, we gotta take that out.
Yeah, so you hit on a couple of things I want to discuss, which is one is that so the main way that you you move forward in this one is to defeat bad guys, which is a paradigm shift from the old Sonic games, where the goal was gotta go fast, right? You could be outside of beating up Robotnik, you could do a pacifist run of Sonic, you know, where it's just kind of like, you know what, I think that the robots are people too, and I'm not here to hurt them. I'm just here to stop Robotnik, So then again, like I feel that somebody should have said, oh, we'll just make them kill all the bad guys, and then somebody somewhere should have said, but then doesn't that make this not about controlling momentum? It makes it about killing bad guys, and then shouldn't we build the game entirely around that? And then is it still a Sonic game at that point? And then the answer to all of that would have been no. But yeah, so right. And so then to your point, right, the flickies, it bent my mind that in a game that is ostensibly about going fast, they set up that so when you kill the bad guy, right, not only can you lose the flicky by getting hit, then you lose them like you lose your coins, right? So you got to go collect them all,
Rings.
Right? Yeah, whatever.
This game doesn't deserve accurate terminology.
Just bleep me from before. We'll pretend I was swearing.
There you go.
So not only does the game not do that, but can you lose them like you would lose rings? But you don't even automatically pick up the flicky when you kill the bad guy.
Nope.
Right?
You free it.
Right. You free it, and then you have to go collect it, which, to your point, is a nightmare, especially for the one that I remember particularly was the one in Green Hill Zone with the bug that jumps. His flicky jumps back and forth too. And I'm
yeah,
like,
the different colored ones, because there's like 4 or 5 different colors, and like the red one always moves like the red one, the blue one always moves like the blue one, but that one that bounces,
yeah.
if I could have
Yeah,
just let
no.
that one to die, I would have.
Oh, that would have been a nice mechanic if it's like you have to rescue 7 out of the 8 flickies.
Yeah, you need 80% flickies.
Well, because I think they did a penny arcade about that one where it was just like all right, you said rescue the 6 villagers. I got 6 villagers. It's like, but there were 8 villagers. The quest said rescue 6 villagers. Quest complete.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, but the fact that you don't automatically pick it up bent my mind, because I was sitting there, I was trying to kind of figure out, because I knew I was there to ostensibly rescue flickies, but I was like, okay, I'm trying to get a feel for the mechanics. I'm like, all right, there's this big ring. I don't really know what it does. Sometimes I can interact with it. Sometimes I can't. And I was like, oh, this is where I deposit the flickies. And I looked at the bottom right. I'm like, okay. And then there's my UI. Okay, I got it. But it says here I've got like 3 flickies, but I don't have them. Oh my God. And then I just had to go back and scour the dumb level to go find them. And the fact that they track so close to you, it's not even easy to count. Like after you get hit, you're like, did I collect them all again? So
there's a tiny like tweet when you actually touch it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's your one indicator, unless you stop and slowly walk forward and see that they're following behind you in a line. You get that tiny little sound cue, which again is like, oh, somebody thought about it. And instead of realizing that this entire mechanic is not fun, they put a sound cue on it.
Right. And that's the thing ultimately, right? Is the fact that it's a chore. It's like cleaning, you know? So the fact that they added those mechanics in, just again, mind bending. One of the last notes that I had, because I'm sure you still got tons of stuff. I'll just open the space for you. But one of the last notes that I had is that the problem, I think, with Sonic as a whole, right, is that it existed at the point in time when it existed, right, which was during the transition to 3D, right? So at that point, the idea was we can now do things in 3D, therefore everything needs to be in 3D, right? So they tried to put Sonic in 3 dimensions, and I just don't think that it's meant to be. I think it's meant to be a 2-dimensional roller coaster game, and it's super fun when you do it that way. Sonic, all the way up to Sonic 3 was fun, then they went into 3 dimensions, and they were pretty much all trash. And then they did Sonic Mania, and that game's great, you know? And so I just, the thing that I was thinking about is I was like, would anyone in their right mind try to make Celeste 3D? Right? And the answer is no. That would be absurd, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to think, like, because there are super challenging games that are in 3D, but not super challenging precision platformers. Not that I can think of.
Not that I can think of offhand. I'm sure that there are a few that exist, but like, those people know that they're doing a very specific thing, you know, where it's
I feel like the kind of person who wants a super challenging precision platformer, they don't go play an entire game based around that idea. They play Super Mario 64 competitively. You know what I mean? Like, instead of saying, oh, I want a game that requires me to be a demigod, they want to go into a world that's all guardrails and family friendly and then rule it like a king. I mean, you watch like a speed run of Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, you know, all the way up to now with Super Mario Odyssey, and the things people do are insane, mind-bending application of the mechanics and the physics of the world, combining crazy, not glitches, just incredible mastery of the physics of the universe. And part of what makes it so impressive is just like what makes it impressive in real life. When I am sitting in a Barca lounger, scratching my ass, watching a gymnast in the Olympics, I'm like, wow, that person is incredible. But if I had to have that level of skill just to go check my mail, it wouldn't be incredible. If the whole world was that difficult to navigate, it wouldn't be exceptional, right? So like, Celeste is Celeste because the whole world is that difficult to navigate, but it's also set up for it, right? Super Mario Odyssey speedrunning is not set up for speedrunning, which is what makes it impressive.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because actually, while you were talking, I Googled 3D precision platformer, and the internet said, "Oh, you want precision platformers?" And I clicked on it, and all two dimensional, every last one of them. And then, but I agree with you completely. Is that I think that the Mario team, and again because they know what they're doing, is they said like, okay, but what if people wanted hyper precision platforming in Mario Odyssey, and they have those balloon challenges where it's like, where it's like, okay, I'm going to go put a balloon in a place, and can anyone else get it? And so that's a way, because that does require incredible hair precision on exactly how you're doing and how you're executing on moves. But in order to play the game, you don't need any of that. So I think that honestly, like I was saying, is that Sonic's issue is that it never should have been put in this position. This game, not to bury the lead, this game should never have existed, right? Because Sonic should have never made the transition into 3D. It just. But the thing is that nobody knew at the time that this wasn't. It was and I think you might have told me about this, but is that somebody, like, if you go through a 50s cooking catalog or a 60s cooking catalog, everything's in Jello, man. They got meat in Jello. They got like all of this. It's just Jello all the way down, right? And somebody said was like, why would you put ground beef and like this stuff in Jello? And the person said, well, refrigeration was new, like that was a new thing, so people could now make gelatin, and they didn't know, like, so they were like, just all of it goes into Jello. It's that, right? It's like, it's all 3D, and it's like, okay, now we know, some things taste good in Jello and some things don't. We should just put everything in Jello, right? But they, at the time, they were like, Sonic in Jello, Mario in Jello, it all goes in Jello.
So the implication there is that Mario goes well with Jello and Sonic does not. Okay.
That is correct.
Just want to make sure I followed that.
Sonic is the meat of Jello. Tagline for the episode: Sonic is the meat of Jello.
Every once in a while, I feel bad that we don't like have funny in episode titles for the game episodes.
Yeah,
that would be a good one, because I think anyone who looked at that and didn't already know what the show was and then clicked on it, it's like, okay, you know what you're getting into, right? Might scare off some other people, but so I do want to, I think, kind of conclude my thoughts with just pressing on the exploration thing, because we played a good Sonic game that does this, which is Sonic Mania, right? If you go online and you look at like blown up map views of Sonic 1 levels, Sonic 2 levels, Sonic 3 levels, by the time you get to Sonic 3 and Knuckles, those levels are quite a bit more branching. You can get from point A to point Z in like 2 or 3 ways instead of only one way. And there's almost always multiple paths instead of just once in a while it's a treat, right? But they're still very left to right linear, right? Or sometimes like top to bottom or whatever. But they're, generally you go from left to right. In Sonic Mania, they said, what if the levels were like massive? And they actually didn't come up with that entirely on their own. Sonic CD had levels like that. The levels in Sonic CD, which is a 2D Sonic game and is actually pretty good despite being made by a separate team, has very large levels that it kind of entices you, because what happens in a game where you're normally going 1,000 miles an hour is you will rocket past your one opportunity to have gone up instead of down. And if you know you're going to play this game again, or you're just the kind of person who wants to like really squeeze the life out of a video game, that little visual tick makes you go, oh, I got to replay this level.
Yeah. Oh, I got to go back for that. Yep.
Right. And that's super fun. This game thinks that it's doing that. Sonic 3D Blast thinks that it is giving you this big sprawling world and encouraging you to explore it. But the feeling that I actually got is the way people describe modern Final Fantasies, which is it's a hallway simulator. There is one true path between here and there, and then there's these tiny little dead ends that don't go anywhere, but there's a treasure chest down at the end of that dead end, or maybe there's a little bit of flavor text or something. So you're going to go, but the game is super linear, and that's fine. I'm not saying linear games are a bad thing, but I'm saying if your game is going to require exploration, you must make the exploration fun and interesting, because it is required
and meaningful. Because I mean, and that's actually one of the things that when I'm for example, I mean, and I am by no means a game designer, right? But when I'm building a D&D adventure, if I'm like, oh, hey, like they can make this cool check, or there's a shopkeeper that, like has this fun backstory. I'm like, and then if they spend the time to get that backstory, what do they get from it? Like, so, do they get like a cool little item? It could just be a one-off thing, or like an extra little bit of gold, or just something, right? But if it's just like, oh, I got I went down this side thing and I got 10 extra rings, and it's like, okay, I will pile it onto the hundreds of extra rings, right? But for Sonic, the exploration, right, is generally you got to see a cool new thing. But when all you're seeing in the game is the floor, it doesn't matter, right? Like,
hey, new floor tiles, I think.
Woo! Yeah. Because at one point I broke into an area and I was like, oh, hey, I was clever because I recognized that there was like a crack in the wall, Zelda style. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go in there. I went in there and they were like, hey, here's like 10 more rings. I was like, okay.
Yeah. So if I had the wherewithal to go and find this part of the clip from when I streamed this game, the level you're talking about is the one where there's like little marble. The wall looks kind of like it's made out of stone, right? Mm-hmm. And there's like the little relief, and it's like, oh, that little relief is very specific. I bet if I do the spin dash, I can crash through that little relief. And lo and behold, you can. And I think one of them is that's where the special stage is hidden in that level, which feels a little bit like a reward, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not what you get. Sometimes you just get nonsense. But when it is like, oh, it's the special stage, or oh, it's a shortcut, or oh, there was a flicky back there, so I had to figure that out, then it at least feels meaningful. What totally sucked the air out of that for me is they then stamped that same little relief into places where it doesn't break through.
Boo, which earns.
Yeah, which turned it into rolling against the wall and bouncing off like an asshole simulator, and that's not fun. And I want to be clear, in case anybody out there is saying, oh, but in the 2 last dungeons in Link to the Past, there's a whole bunch of walls that look like you can bomb through them, but you can't. Right. And the game spent the entire game teaching you that this little crack looks like you can bomb through it. And then in the dungeon where there's cracks that you can't bomb through, they're everywhere. And it's supposed to be like that to mess with you. That is a very intentional choice after you've been playing the game for 12 hours to mess with you, to take something and turn it on its head. This, in the same level where they teach you that crashing through the wall is a thing you can do, they immediately undermine it. So it's like, I'm not going to roll against every single dark patch on the wall just to see if there's 10 rings behind it. I don't care that much.
You know what it is? It's Doom. It's
it is. It's looking for the block that will open the door. It is. Thank you.
But it's harder to do.
It is. It is exactly that. I have one last positive comment that I want to make sure I don't forget, because I do, again, legitimately mean like this was an across the board win. They mapped the spin dash to a button instead of to down and then a button. And future 2D Sonic games actually copied that. Instead of holding down and then pressing the jump button, you just have a dedicated spin dash button, which, granted, if you're used to playing normal good Sonic, it is a little hard to break that muscle memory, but I think it is the superior control scheme.
Oh, it super is, but they did it because they had to.
No, they absolutely did it because they had to. But it is a good enough improvement to the control scheme that later 2D Sonic games copied it.
Right. I mean, and which is fair, but yeah, I mean, at first I was like, well, oh my God, how do I do a spin dash? I can't press down.
I had the same existential crisis.
What? And then I pressed the button. Okay. Oh, I was like, oh no, that is nice. But yeah, I guess I shouldn't look the gift horse in the mouth, but part of me is like, this horse isn't a gift. You were legally obligated to give it to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's,
but credit where credit's due.
Yeah.
It's that's fine.
I don't know if I would recognize it as a legitimately good idea without the fact that it's also present in like Sonic Mania.
Right.
But it is, and I trust those people. So.
I feel like, a part of me almost wants to give the people in Sonic Mania more credit than the people who came up with it here, because here they had to do it. Then Sonic Mania later realized we don't have to do this, but we should do it.
Yeah.
So they had to do it. later Sonic games, they get more credit because they realize they should do it.
Yeah, Sonic 3D Blast was like, look at this pretty yellow rock, and Sonic Mania was like, oh, gold. You can do all kinds of stuff with gold.
Yeah, I'll take that off here. It's like when I play Civilization 6 and I'll take over another area. I'm like, oh, you didn't know that there was uranium around here because you don't know what the hell to do with this rock that makes you sick, but I do.
Make people sick by exploding them.
So how years ago we clashed rocks together to make fire? Yeah. Well, I clashed some rocks together too hard.
Gotta learn to control it, Gohan.
So what do you think, man?
It's bad. And I mean, it was bad. Full nostalgia goggles, like no question. But one of the rare exceptions where I'm like, but even if you have nostalgia goggles, could you possibly find this mess enjoyable? Like, it's bad. And it's, I want to be very clear in case I haven't made this clear. I want to be as straightforward about this as I can be. The reason this game is such a catastrophe is because it came on the back of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. We had an established formula that no one was asking for them to change it, but Sega, kind of to your exact sentiment, felt like they had to, and they ruined it, and then they continued to ruin it for like 2 decades, which is just like, man, way to throw good money after bad. But I also need to be clear, this game is bad in its own right. If you stripped away the Sonic-ness and you put other sprites in there, the platforming would still suck. The controls would still feel sloppy. The level design would still feel vacant and yet claustrophobic, right? The core mechanic of find these things so you can go from here to there is not a bad mechanic, but the way it's executed is not very good. And again, I happen to know that this game was done by a separate team and it was rushed. And I'm sure this is not the thing that any of them wanted to produce other than the person who wrote the music who did an A+ job. Everybody else I'm sure is like, oh man, it's not that good, but it is a failure in its own right. And it is super duper a failure as a Sonic game. It's full nostalgia goggles, no question. The last thing is this game is so bad that the lead programmer was at a convention in like 2009, so decades later, and somebody was complaining about this game, and he basically said, yeah, and he personally released a ROM hack called Sonic 3D Blast The Director's Cut, which attempts to tighten up the controls, it polishes some of the graphics, and personally, I don't think it fixes a fundamentally broken game, but it shows that even the people who worked on it were like, this isn't quite right, but we just don't have the time and permission to either get it right, if it can be gotten right, or just scrap it entirely. So it's terrible. Don't play it. Don't even play the director's cut. Play the weird ROM hack that somebody else made that's a 2D version of this game, like reinterpreted into 2D using Sonic 3 assets. But it's, oh God, I remembered it as being a tragic failure. It is a tragic failure. Full nostalgia goggles required. Demon vanquished. This game sucks.
So no nostalgia goggles.
Loved it. Loved everything about
Loved it. Would play it. Recommend it to everyone. No. No, full nostalgia goggles. To your point, or to kind of what we said is that, like Sonic went 3D, and I like how you kind of mentioned, and then they continued to do it 20 years. The immediate thing I thought of is it's Peter Griffin playing poker, where he's like, hit me, hit me, hit me, 21, hit me, 25, hit me. It's like, just stop. Like you had it. You had a winning hand. And then you did the bad thing, and then you continue to press down the bad thing. No, I mean, there's nothing. This game there's nothing redeemable about it. I mean, a lot of times, like the game's, you know what it is? It's chaotic evil. The game's chaotic evil. It doesn't follow its own rules. It's very, very poorly made, and it is not fun at all. A lot of times I'll be like, oh, well, maybe I would recommend this game I wouldn't recommend this game to anyone. There's just no reason to play it. It's not even a great exemplar of bad game design, because it doesn't do one thing particularly poorly, right? Like even Jekyll and Hyde is conveyance, right? You want to know bad conveyance, you play Jekyll and Hyde. if you want to know broken game controls, you play Superman 64, right? Like there are reasons to play some of these bad games as an exemplar of like, hey, here's how you can take a cool concept and do it really poorly, so the opposite end of the spectrum. This game just does everything at like on a scale of -10 to 10. It just does everything at like a -4. Not the worst in the world, but it's not fun. So I mean, it's Sonic 3D. It's not a blast.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone. There's no player 2 there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creep in with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while.